Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, between Amy and Laura, they said everything I need to say, really. But yes, a warm welcome from Writing Our Legacy. As you know, or you may not know, Writing Our Legacy is an organization in the city which is doing brilliant work to give voice to authors of color in the city and beyond. It's the amazing work is documented on the website. I highly would advise you to get to that website as quickly as possible. I'm not going to take too long because we've got really tight timelines, but I'm going to introduce Kadija George, who's the co-editor of this wonderful book, Encounters with James Baldwin. If you haven't got it yet, it's on sale at the back of the room, so please go and get your copy. Kadija is going to be leading a panel, which she will introduce, of very eminent local, let me stress, local talent. We've got great local talent in this city. And I'm lucky enough to be familiar with all of them. I've rubbed shoulders with this great local talent. I'm not talented in writing at all myself. But yes, welcome everyone. Please look at the website, as I said, for further events from Writing Our Legacy. And I'm going to hand over to Kadija.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's so lovely to see so many people here. This is really great. So thank you for coming. And yeah, lots of local talent, some who are in the room, some who I recognise, and who I'm also lucky to, I'm sure, but even though they'll be on their anthologies, I'm kind of local. Yeah, we've got a lovely, talented panel here. First of all, to my left, we have Roy McFarlane, who is, well, they're all award-winning writers in one shape or another. So Roy is an amazing poet, award-winning poet, as I said, and he's got about 3 collections out now, right? And so I really approached him to say, please write a poem for this collection, which he so kindly did. Thank you very much. So we'll hear from him first. Then we also have Ray Shell. And I was just thinking today, how long have I known Ray? So long. But Ray is his book Iced was just like really by Maya Angelou, was given a great response from Maya Angelou, which just zoomed in, and we've been waiting for the follow-up from He's finished it for the past 30 years. Remember, I get people emailing me. I say Ray Shell. They say, I know Ray. Iced. When's the next one? And I don't put them in contact, as you can tell. But yeah, you said the play, the follow-up play. When is that going to be?
Hopefully, right after next autumn.
Next autumn.
In fact, that man sitting over there, right there, he's going to play Cornelius.
Yeah, please go see that. Yeah, amazing. And we also then have C Sharp. C isn't actually in the book, but she is going to be reading on behalf of Sonia Grant, who is in the book. So we really, really appreciate that. Thank you. We all agree that C, including Sonia, would be a great person to read an extract from that. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. So first of all, I'm not reading lots of in-depth bios because I know you're going to buy the book and you can read them then. And I just want us to get into the listening and the talking and giving time to ask questions. So first of all, I'm going to ask Roy if he will read his poem, please.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. And yeah, let's start off with the poem. Yeah? It's titled James Baldwin Weeps with the Weight of Tiredness. Morning, I'm going to try and do a Negro spiritual. Let's see how we go with it, right? James Baldwin once said, I've never been in despair about the world. I've been enraged by it. I don't think I'm in despair. I can't afford despair. I can't tell my nephew, my niece, you can't tell the children there's no hope. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. In the chamber of a gun, they let loose a projectile that found its way in the chamber of Medgar Evers' heart, who spoke of humanity in the chambers of horrors of America. And you couldn't cry. You couldn't say anything except Medgar is gone. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. In a restaurant in London, instead of a menu, the head waiter informs you of a call waiting for you. Your sister rises. Your sister returns as if she had been at the foot of the cross. She continues with formalities, breaking bread, drinking wine, but she can't bear it no more. Well, I've got to tell you because the press is on its way over here. They just killed Malcolm. Sometimes I'm up and sometimes I'm down. In black and white on Pathé News, they ask you about Malcolm. You reiterate forcefully that Malcolm was another Negro man, yet one more Negro man has been murdered. Rewind the reel to the beginning. If you watch it closely, you will see a forlorn, folded body, drained and drawn, wondering who's next. Sometimes I'm almost to the ground, oh yes, Lord. In Palm Springs, by a swimming pool, sitting with Billy D. Williams, Aretha Franklin's sweet voice flows from the radio. A little respect, just a little bit. I get tired, just a little bit. James Baldwin is tired with Columbia Pictures after being hired to write the screenplay of Malcolm X. They want to shoot him down again, rewrite after rewrite, as if the 30 shots that laid our brother down wasn't enough. Billy D is tired, always tired. Tired of losing out to Sidney Poitier. Now it looks like he might lose out to a darkened Charlton Heston playing the role of Malcolm X. James is tired when the phone rings. He picks up. Martin just been shot. He's not dead yet, but it's a headwind. James dropped the phone and went.
Oh, I love that poem. I mean, I love poetry that tells story. If it doesn't tell story, I'm like, where's the story? And we learned so much in that poem about his relationship with Malcolm and Edgar Evans and Martin Luther King. It's chilling. It's chilling. So, but I'm going to come to questions kind of at the end, just because I know we started a little bit too late, and I just kind of can see questions buzzing out for people there. So, Ray, I'm going to ask you to read an extract from our McFarlane thing. While he's looking for that, the book includes poetry, memoir, non-fiction, and you actually had a few people who had met James Baldwin in Britain for the book too. So Ray, go ahead. Thank you.
I must have been 14 or 15 years old when I first read James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain. This iconic missive resonated with me on so many levels and for so many reasons. It was the cultural and especially the spiritual links I shared with King James that immediately glued me to the literary life of John Grimes, the protagonist of the story. John's father, Gabriel, was his stepfather and a pastor of the church the Grimes family attended just as my father, Charles Shell, was my stepfather and a pastor of the Pentecostal church the Shell family attended. All of Baldwin's Pentecostal iconography, rituals, and imagery resonated powerfully within me. I understood and experienced firsthand the dark secrets of John Grimes' tainted revelations. I too had felt the Spirit coming down in the midst of the church saints, dressed in their blood of the Lamb white robes. I too had witnessed and watched the saints whirling under the power of the Holy Ghost, prophesying and speaking in tongues. I too had struggled with carnal thoughts that strayed darkly away from the holy, straight, and narrow thoughts of the saved and sanctified community at which at age 13 I became a member. The life Baldwin described in Go Tell It on the Mountain, his first novel, was my life, so I instinctively knew James Baldwin was someone I could trust, learn from, and emulate. That he wrote and created visceral stories of truth based on his living experiences in our Black American ghetto meant I could do the same thing. So by using him as a mirror of inspiration, and I honor, mirror of inspiration, I honor, thank you, Mr. Wrong. I honor, can you hear me? Yeah. I honor King James by trying to write words of simple clarity and irrefutable power just as he did. I don't remember actively hoping to ever meet King James. I didn't believe it was possible, as I understood he didn't live in the United States. So when I was brought to the United Kingdom by Oscar Johnson and Lon Satin to star in a Western gospel musical and met my stage brother Clark Peters, who was also starring in the Western production of Bubbling Brown Sugar, I was intrigued when he told me he just met Baldwin in Paris when he first arrived in Europe and how Baldwin had mentored him. I felt like I was a few steps closer to the king, even though, as I said, I wasn't actively searching for him. I started reading his collection of essays, The Fire Next Time, and I realized then that Baldwin was more than just a novelist. He was a chronicler of Black African American thought and an activist with political ideas that I agreed with. He was not afraid to question the agenda of white America, nor to question America's commitment to Black people, which is something I also questioned but had never spoken about publicly. I had never put any thoughts down on paper about this, but the fact that James Baldwin did write about the state of Black people in white America in every book he wrote, in every television, magazine, or newspaper interview he appeared in, made me realize that Baldwin was more than a conventional novelist. King James had a higher calling like that of the boy preacher he'd been before he took up the pen, a higher calling anointed by God, that it was possible for artists to be more than entertainers or court jesters panhandling for public acceptance and financial validation meant it was possible we could produce, like Baldwin, sacred texts containing uncomfortable truths that admirers and critics could either agree with or vehemently disavow. The important thing was James Baldwin was not afraid to put what he thought and felt on paper for the entire world to see.
So C. Sharp is going to read from Can I Get an Amen Somebody by Sonia Grant, who is also... Yeah, C is going to read from Sonia's piece. Sonia is a historian and a non-fiction writer who's also based in Sussex, and her piece is called Can I Get an Amen Somebody? So, thank you.
This begins with a quote. The church was very exciting. It took a long time for me to disengage myself from this excitement. And on the blindest, most visceral level, I never really have and never really will. There's no music like that music, or drama like the drama of saints rejoicing, the sinners moaning, and the tambourines racing, and all those voices coming together and crying holy unto the Lord. There is still, for me, no pathos, quite like the pathos of those multicolored, worn, somehow triumphant and transfigured faces, speaking from the depth of a visible, tangible, continuing despair of the goodness of the Lord. James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time. By his own admission, James Baldwin was a lapsed Pentecostalist, and whilst he may have physically left the church, its imprint was an indelible one. More than bricks and mortar, the church was a set of rigid rules and regulations that shaped his character and perspective, especially in terms of his lifelong quest to make sense of a world contorted by racism, discrimination, and injustice. Although he had many legitimate issues with the church, inadvertently, it lit a rage within him that was never really extinguished. Arguably, Baldwin's sense of social justice began percolating from the time he emerged as a boy preacher, aged 14 to 17, when he made his escape from the church's structures that had begun to suffocate him and before it thwarted his burgeoning ambition to express himself through writing. There were similarities between Baldwin's church experience, described as the holiness tradition, i.e. Pentecostalism, and my own background, which is why the play resonated. Certain features seldom stray beyond the Old Testament. Turn with me to, the preacher would begin, assuredly, and as cheeky young people, we always finish the sentence under our breath, the book of Revelation. Invariably, emphasis was placed on hellfire and brimstone and the avoidance of sinning. Baldwin began writing the Amen Corner in 1952. In a foreword to the Amen Corner, speaking of Sister Margaret, Baldwin wrote, "She is in the church because her society left her no other place to go." In the play, Sister Margaret's authority ebbed away as parishioners became emboldened and challenged her hypocrisy. Similarly, when most of my peers began to drift away from the church, they reasoned that the church leaders were unrelatable. The structures of Pentecostalism meant many were ill-prepared for the outside world. Consequently, many of my friends mastered the art of code switching. Either consciously or unconsciously, they changed their accent, tone, mannerisms, or demeanor depending on their situations or surroundings in order to fit in. In that regard, we identified with the character of David and his pain. He was the personification of many youth who yearned to escape the church's vice-like grip. While Sister Margaret feared that David would be swallowed up by the vices of secular music industry, our church mothers feared that our young men would be subjected to police stop and search and criminalized by the legal system. Gradually, however, young people at my church began imperceptibly to inch their way to the exit door. In reading reviews of the Amen Corner over the years, it was noticeable that reviewers didn't stray much beyond the play's sweet gospel music. Conceivably, it was an indicator that they weren't particularly interested in critiquing the nuances of the Black church. Rather, a prevailing sentiment of British reviewers was that it was too long. It would benefit from some judicious editing. The Guardian theater critic Michael Billington referred to a 2013 London performance. "I don't think the Amen Corner is a great play, but I get the feeling it is one that its author, James Baldwin, was compelled to write." Baldwin once said that he left the church to become a writer, but never left the pulpit. His religious upbringing cast a long shadow, as was apparent from the titles of some of his works, among them Go Tell It on a Mountain, The Devil Finds Work, and The Amen Corner.
Thank you so much. They were beautiful readings. I'm just going to address some questions you directly to the work, ask you some general questions, and then throw it out to the audience. So Roy, the question I wanted to ask you was not only about this poem, but linking it to your work, because Roy has this beautiful collection called The Healing Next Time, and it includes a series of poems of people in this country who have been subject to police violence and died due to that. And and I was just, when I was reading this poem, and just thinking about that collection, and of course with the title, I keep saying, sometimes I say to people, oh, the book is called The Fire Next Time, just because the healing next time that's really what he was saying in some ways, not only the fire next time, but how do we heal from this? So please give us some kind of links between you writing that and this and your own work and Baldwin. Can you do that? Thank you. Just that.
Just a few things there. Well, first of all, I've got to say thank you to the editors for putting a magical book together like this and just getting an invite to Concentrate. The idea, I mean, James Baldwin is part of my journey. Without going into details about finding my way, but you know, I'm a child of the 60s. I don't think it was until the 80s that maybe running to Bilston College and moving around with black guys that I found a bit of reggae and jazz kind of thing. But all of that leading up to there, I'm similar to James Baldwin, brought up in a gospel, in a Pentecostal church, son of a deacon, a young minister. And so I've had this code switching going on in my early days kind of thing. And I think it was the 90s when I was working. I was middle class, working, got a nice job. My father worked hard to make me go the right way, keep me out of stop and search and all these kind of things. I finally get a good job, I'm in church and etc. etc. But then I've got this thing going on in me that something's not right about the full essence of my identity. And it's when I start to look at the civil rights movement, picking up a book like Taylor Branch, if I remember, he had a book called Parting the Waters, I think, 2 volumes, about detailed work of all the players of the civil rights. And then Martin Luther King was part of my over, as it were, to speak like him, to preach like him, to think like him. And then somebody handed me Malcolm X's autobiography. And then James Baldwin was placed in front of me, The Fire Next Time. And I found something that just echoed my journey. And so it's been a continuous journey about the idea of witness. I think it permeates through what I do in everything I write, whether it's plays, whether it's poetry, is to be a witness to the world around here. But I think also what my mother laid on me over the years is this idea of love. We can fight injustices, we can tear the walls down, we can set the place on fire. But what then? What's the next step after that? And for me, that is the healing, that is the love. And certainly when you asked me to do this, I looked through so many things. I wanted to do an essay about, like something like the journey to James Baldwin, where you asked me for a poem. And so, after, I think, what was the film that came out in his latest book, I Am Not Your Negro, if I remember? And I think that was notebooks that they had found, and he wanted to put together something, especially between 1963 and 1968. Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King died in that period of time during the civil rights kind of thing, and that was the focus of the poem. And I could see when you watch the films, when you see his journey, you can see how tired and beaten down that this person was. And I equally think there's a reflection in my journey. From the 90s to about 2018, I've been involved in youth and community, race equality, on the streets, activism. And I'm telling you, even coming to Brighton is a man. I'm coming from Birmingham, probably you picked that up in my accent, I don't know. But I'm coming all the way from Birmingham, and I landed here 21, 22. And I think that journey is because I was tired. I'm tired. And yet, we still have to do this work. We still have to write. We still have to fight. And I think that's what the poem reflected. That tiredness, which was a reflection of me as well.
Thank you. Just to say, I'm particularly pleased that you included Medgar Evers, because a lot of people forget him in the civil rights movement. So it was good that you had him there to remind us. So Ray, reading your essay, it guided me back to it. So you started off with Go Tell It on the Mountain. So you've guided me back to that because I read that when I was about 13, 14 and I didn't get it at all. And I just thought to myself, and I didn't read anything of Baldwin for at least, 15 years. So I didn't get it. I think I'm the next ready Bill Street at all. So even though you talked a little bit about why it was important, can you just say a little bit more about Go Tell It on the Mountain, how it resonated with you in terms of, because I think everybody who's written in the book, basically, they've been saying just what it is in Baldwin that's taken them forward, not only their own story, and really picked on some very specific things. For some, what was really important, I think, for writers in the UK, and the ones who went through the UK system, that you're reading, some of them, is about going through the ESN school, when they're going through school and being selected as being children who were not very bright, and what they were put through, but just the different pieces of James Baldwin that they read that then supported them as they had to go through that, But okay, so you were raised in the States, but it's still, and in the church as well. So how did Go Tell It on the Mountain, but other bits of like Baldwin, like before you met him, how did it all kind of come together for you with your life and James? And maybe you can mention another piece of work that really sticks out for you.
Hello. I went to a library and I saw the cover of Ralph Ellison's book. I think it was Man, yeah. And also cover of, that's why covers are important. Arrayed in the Sun, and inside the covers, they had pictures of the authors. They were black, and I'm like, yeah, black people write books, because I wouldn't have known that the kind of books that I was being given in high school or in elementary school. And the thing about Go Tell It on the Mountain was that I was 14, and he was writing as a 14-year-old. His father was his stepfather. My father was my stepfather. Me and my stepfather sort of reconciled when I graduated. But so we had that in common. And also, his father was a Pentecostal minister, and so was my father, and my mother, and my uncle. So all the things that he was describing in the book about the saints and the white and the rolling around on the floor and speaking in tongues and all that, and tarrying half the night on Saturday night calling Jesus until he either fell asleep or fell out and spoke in tongues, I understood all of that, and it resonated with me because that was my kind of upbringing. So talking about the code, I realized that there had to be something more than this for me, because my house wasn't my house, it was my father's house and my mother's house, even down to the color of the toilet paper. So, and it wasn't that they were bad people, it's just that I had no choice in the matter. And I think that from reading Baldwin's stories, and especially that novel, he didn't have any choices either. So all those things sort of resonated with me and made it easier for me to understand what he was actually, writing and why.
Thank you. Sorry, I just had to hold my thing. I'm going to go over to C next, and just in terms of reading Sonia's piece, what do we learn about the writer and Baldwin? Do you think?
Well, one thing that Sonia mentions is that Baldwin was really important to her because up until the Amen Corner was produced and performed in London in 1987, she really hadn't seen much blackness in theatre. She thought of it as mostly being a white institution, and as somebody that was an aspiring writer herself, that was, I guess, really empowering for her to recognize that there was somebody out there which she could hold as like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Inspiration.
Yeah, it's an inspiration, a role model, that's what I was looking for. And so like, yeah, representation really matters. Another thing that she had mentioned was that in the essay, which I didn't read, this part, but she had mentioned that, writers need to write from experience, and that's one thing that she really admired about Baldwin and his work, was that he was writing authentically from his own experience as a Black man, as a queer person. And I guess that maybe something that she took from it. Another point, I'm not sure if I'm going off topic a little bit, but I think it's important to talk about the Black church and how in a white society, it represents more than just God or religion. It represents something of community, belonging, safety. And when a person decides that they want to leave that kind of structure, it has to be on their own terms, and it has to be an act of bravery and defiance, and there has to be some kind of inner strength happening. Otherwise, you become a lost soul. So that's something that I guess I was thinking about as I was reading the essay that Sonia had written, because it's basically about religion and Blackness and how those two things go together.
But what she also mentions in there, which I thought was, what she also mentions in there, which I thought was important, is a real, we get all these little bits of what Black life is like in Britain from everybody's piece. And she talks about how the matriarchs had to start the churches in their homes because the people didn't want them in the church. They were Christians and they were going to church. It's like, oh, thank you for coming, but please don't come back. And they were doing it in their homes. And a lot of people don't know this. Because, of course, being Christians, they're never going to shout out about how racist that was. They're just going to deal with it in whichever way it needs to be dealt with. Did either of you kind of find this kind of...
Just interesting, just keep listening. Not to mention of my collection, but I mean, Living by Troubled Water actually looks at the idea as, that's one of my collections at the back. Looks at the idea of the church being a place of sanctuary kind of thing. How ground or a clearing, beige sugars from Color Purple creates a clearing, and people who are coming from slavery, who are escaping from slavery, use that place to celebrate, to live, to cry, to what's name, and that has been the church in dark times, in troubled waters. And I think that's a powerful statement when you say that when we decide whether it's because of the institution, whether because it's no longer fitting our journey kind of thing, that we step out of there, it is truly brave. I'll give you a little joke. I buried my mom in 2014, and as I said, as a young minister, I'm removed from the church for about 20 years. I'm burying my mother, and the preacher who loves me, who was a great mentor, in the middle of my mom's funeral starts to preach about me, and when you're coming back to God, and when you're going to take up your mantle and walk with God again. I tell you, it's a brave thing to walk away from these things.
Well, our church started at home, like you said, because we couldn't afford the rent in the first place. But we collectively, over a few months, put together money to get someplace. And Daddy found he worked in a hotel, so we found bits and pieces of our carpet. So the church started in home because it started there, and then it went abroad into the storefront. So that's very, very true.
To move away from the church discussion, I just wanted to ask you, when you are one of the people who actually did meet Baldwin, I know very briefly, and I know it must have been like an hour moment. Tell us how you felt when you met him.
Well, I just finished the matinee of Starlight Express in Lawn Satin. The producer brought me to.
Name dropping that's going on.
I name drop.
Oh no, the titles,
You mentioned
theatre.
No.
That's okay. It doesn't just go and show what an esteemed audience, esteemed panel. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's just my work, but Lawn Satin brought him backstage, and I wasn't published then. So I didn't really consider myself a writer, so I just sat there with my mouth open because he was in my dressing room, and I told him that I wrote because of him, and he said that you put the star in Starlight, and I just sort of fell on the floor. And so all the things I wish I could have asked him now, I didn't ask him then because I was just freaked out, honestly. Same thing I want to met Michael Jackson. I'm honored now just to, go on that journey. And I understand a lot more of what he was writing then because of what I'm writing now. But meeting him was just like an out-of-body experience.
I wrote up so many lovely questions. I'm not going to get the chance to ask all of them, but 2 questions I'm dying to ask. Number 1, what do you think, and I know this is kind of circumspect, what would you kind of think that Baldwin would think with what is going on in America today?
I'm sure loads of you want to ask that question. Okay, because one of my things is as well, I haven't, up until this afternoon before coming here, I hadn't heard much of any loud Black voices about what is going on, especially with behaviour was what is going on. And then I did get this email just with, you believe this, with Mukoma Wa Ngugi, who's saying Ngugi Wa Thiong'o Sam, saying, we've written, we're taking Trump, we're taking him to court. Because the way he's going on, and somebody's actually doing something active about what is going on, about how students are being treated at Cornell University. But what do you think? Do you think Baldwin, maybe do you think they would have taken away his citizenship or something? Because he's going to speak out.
Well, Baldwin would be in jail. It would have been cancelled. Trump would have tried to have him killed, like he said he will try to kill people who he doesn't agree with. He's trying to shut down. Or anything that isn't Fox News, he's trying to get rid of. But the thing is, Black folks, we warned them about it. Capitol warned them about it for years. We told them. And I think the thing about it is now is that, Black people realize that if they get out there and start jumping up and down, they'll be shot and martial law will be called in. And look at it this way. The white folks, y'all mostly put them in power, along with the young Black cousin and nephew of mine that wouldn't listen. So you're going to reap what you sow. And I think it has to wait until the Republicans or his MAGA community understand and get bitten behind by what he's put in. And then they'll realize, we told you so. I mean, the 2025 project for 2025 has been out there for the last couple of years, and people are like, oh, he's never going to do that. But he is doing it now. So James Baldwin would have probably stayed behind in wherever country he's in that is not the United States, like me. Right?
Me too.
I have no desire to go back there. I'm trying to get my children and my brothers and sisters out of there. Because the thing about it is what the United States is going to realize that they're not the only game in town. The African countries that have spent all the last 30 years being illustrated as poor, they got skyscrapers in Nigeria. You know what I mean? Those booming economies are welcoming Black Americans in. So if they don't want you, come to us and we can use your expertise. And your money. So it's not I think sometimes things happen to actually show you what the other possibilities are. And like, look at it this way. I wrote a few years ago that sometimes I think integration was probably the worst thing that could have happened to America, to Black Americans, only because before integration, we had to have our own schools, we had to have our own commercial, we had to have all that because they didn't want our money. But then as soon as they opened for the money, then all those things that we had, institutions, died. They burned up Black Wall Street, all those kind of things. Now is the time, if you want to teach your children about their history, start your own schools. If you want to, if you don't want to buy from Walmart, start your own stores, which they have. So I tend to think that I always try to find, my father always said, try to find the positive out of a negative situation. And I think a lot of positives got to come out of this.
Well, the mic was handed to me. I'm not sure if I had anything else to add to that apart from, I agree. I think if James Baldwin were still alive, he would have just kept his ass here in Europe for safety reasons. I mean, the whole, what's happening with the deconstruction of DEI, diversity, inclusion, equality, and inclusion as a Black queer man. I mean, he's not welcome in that country. No. I'm not welcome in that country. So yeah, I think he would have stayed there. If not, been assassinated long before with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, with George Floyd being murdered around that time. By the way, what is happening with Black Lives Matter at this stage?
They changed it to Liberty Square, and they painted over his,
Yeah, it's getting removed, it's getting erased. And so, I've been thinking about what Uncle Jimmy would do if he's still, I'm called Uncle Jimmy.
Uncle Jimmy, King Jimmy.
King Jimmy. We got different, names of endearment for him. But I wonder what would Uncle Jimmy do if he was still around? What kind of advice would he pass on to younger generations, my generation and younger, and how to deal with these issues that have been ongoing for centuries. How do we survive in with this kind of legacy? And how do we actually how do we make the world a little bit more less complicated, more manageable?
That's a good word, survival. Yeah. Also, yeah, survival. You've got to think about whatever. Roy, please.
I'm intrigued with the UK and the European kind of perspective, because sometimes I just think when I'm looking at Starmer pampering and licking ass, as it were, kind of thing, it just feels. I know there's an idea of being a diplomacy kind of thing, but I'm just worried where we're going, the UK, Europe, and how we're being affected with that. That this place may no longer be a safe place. What was quite beautiful to see, I think it was about a year ago, at the top of here, when a few idiots came out to stand, and the whole, or a great kind of number of diverse background of communities stood here at the top of Brighton.
Yeah.
Now that's a beautiful sign, and that's what we need to be working on. That it's not one individual or one community, but it is a collective community. And I think that's the thing about James Baldwin. He had this intersectionality about it, whether it's about queerness, whether it's about disability, whatever that is, that together collectively we fight, we stand, and that's the only way we can move forward.
Yeah, that's why Baldwin and Love, that there's a lot of projects about focusing on Baldwin and Love are happening. There is also like a symposium. It's going to be next week just on Baldwin in Britain. It's going to be at Queen Mary's College for the 21st and 22nd of March. And I know that there is a scholar in the States, and his thing is just focusing on love, Baldwin and love, because that's what it basically comes down to. And you don't even have and it's not church related. It doesn't have to be church related. It's not. It's humanism, and it's not related. One last question I'm going to ask you. But a quick answer, if you can. Okay, so I spoke to somebody last week who was like part of the Penguin Classics. So of course Baldwin is under her over, and she said that Baldwin's books now have been increased selling for about 25%. This is during this time. What do you think is so endearing? He wasn't given any awards at the time, but what do you think has endeared all of this time about Baldwin's work, please?
Again, I think he speaks to the times. It never goes out of date. Yeah, this guy was a prophet as well as a witness and a person that talked to the times. And because these things are echoing, it's like a cycle. We have these wonderful moments like the Stephen Lawrence, and I couldn't say wonderful moment. Stephen Lawrence lost his life, but after the McPherson report and the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, we got together, we looked at it, and we said, yes, we're going to do something. We're going to come together, and we had 70 odd recommendations to move things forward. And then things peter out 7 years later, and we go back, we take 2 steps forward, we take 5 steps back. And then suddenly we have the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. And that taking a step back happened in the space of 18 months or 2 years kind of thing. And it's this kind of thing that, that's why I think James Baldwin, he wrote in those periods of time, Emmett Till being brutally murdered. He wrote in that time. He wrote in the times of people being assassinated. He wrote that. And we're living in that time. And I think that is why James Baldwin still speaks to us so strongly.
Orange right. I mean, James Baldwin is still in vogue, if that's the right word, because everything that he wrote is now coming to me. Well, it's true. And I think what it is for the white people that are discovering it, is that they see that what he was talking about, you can look in the newspapers and corroborate it. You can look at the way that people are being treated, and the way we women are being treated, the way they'll be the letters they're being treated. Nothing has changed, so until something does change, he will always be relevant.
I'm coming from this from maybe a different perspective because although I have studied, my degrees are in creative writing and literature, I never learned anything about James Baldwin at university. In fact, most of the authors that I studied were white men, white dead men, mostly straight, apart from Oscar Wilde maybe. And so a couple of years ago, I had this reflection of my life and the people that I've been consuming in literature, and I wanted to make a change. I made it my New Year's resolution in 2023 to just read literature by Black authors, and that's how I came across James Baldwin's work. And I guess I've heard his name before, and I just overlooked it because, it was never an assignment. But I made it my assignment, and I hope that more and more people start doing something very similar because it is so rewarding. I mean, I've read literature by mostly Harlem Renaissance writers, and I know that he's a byproduct of the Harlem Renaissance as a child that grew up in the 20s. And I think it's kind of funny too because I remember hearing an interview that he did, and the person interviewing him said, well, most of your readers are all white, and he goes, you don't actually know that. You probably don't realize that a lot of Black people are stealing them off the shelves. And the irony of that is I stole my first copy of this book off of my stepfather's bookshelf. Go tell it on a mountain. Go tell it on a mountain was the first thing I read of his 2 years ago. And I'm getting close to my 40s now, so I wish I had read him much younger.
You've got a lot of time.
I do have a long time, but I'm gonna get through all of it. But the thing is, I do wish that I had read him younger. Maybe I would have been more like you and had just been like, oh, this is not for me right now. Wrong time. But the way it hit me was just, I felt so connected to him. And it might just be, being Black and queer and also somebody that has decided to escape America on my own terms for whatever reasons and going to Europe and try to, find a home in a different location because the United States doesn't feel very welcoming. All these different reasons kind of made me feel like I connect with James Baldwin in a very, very direct kind of way. So
That's good. So make Baldwin your assignment. So we do have time for a few questions. I don't know if there are microphones up there, but we can pass them. Does anybody have a question? That's the first hand I saw. We're probably going to only have about 3 or 4 questions. So if you've got one, put your hand up now. The lady over there with the grey. Yeah. Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
you might have to turn the mute off.
I just want to say, people focus on what Baldwin said, not the way that he said it. Baldwin was a phenomenal writer, exceptional, and I think that gets overlooked, and I wonder why.
Was it a statement or a question?
A question.
Okay, what do you think in terms of the way he said things, rather than just the words, the way?
He would have been more interviewed now had he been living in the time of social media. So what they had first was his words, and people are now discovering him on social media and hearing about the oration, the way he said it. He could have been an actor if he wanted to be. He could have been an actor. He was an activist. He could have been a politician because he had the power of the Pentecostal fire in his words and the way he said it.
Yeah. I think that's the most important part. It's funny growing up in the church. Schools us in so many ways. That I remember growing up, we had to learn the golden verse, as it were. We had to know our scriptures. We had to be able to stand and then be able to project and be able to put it forward, kind of thing. And I think that is the skills when you look at Martin Luther King, when you look at Malcolm X. That ability to be great orators is just amazing,
I'm really sorry. I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, go on to another one.
And I think it's part of the oral tradition. Sorry. It just something came to my mind. It's part of the oral tradition that kept us alive. When you think about when you're going through enslavement, when you're going through Jim Crow, etc., it wasn't the writing, it was the oral tradition that kept our stories, that we passed on to each other. And so we became, or that was our skill. We had to be that skillful.
Thank you. I'm going to add something quickly that a couple of people made me realise as when we were putting the book together, and they said, somebody would always add something different. They said, but people haven't realised that James Baldwin was a philosopher. Yeah. People haven't realised James Baldwin was a historian, and just all of these other things. So in terms of not just the words, the way he said it, it's almost like he was code switching to these different styles, of people he could be, really, as well. So I think maybe that is also part of it. He was just, in stature, he was small, but he was so big, in so many different ways. Okay, so we've got two here. This gentleman here, and then the lady behind with the orange top. Please, thank you.
Hi there. I just wondered how the Pentecostal Church reacted to Baldwin's sexuality. I mean, how it, did he encounter a lot of religious bigotry, or I get the impression it seemed to accept him for who he was, or was that the case? Or
well, the church back then never accepted you the way you were, because if you didn't, they accepted you if they thought you had Jesus. But if you didn't have Jesus, you were on the floor and you're going to be chanting and Jesus, 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 until you got Jesus. And choirs is kept, undercover homosexuality in the church is rife. I mean, you join the choir, your booty's going to somebody. And so that's the way it was. I mean, and if you were caught, then you have been hauled up. But as far as, getting the kind of, he left it because of that kind of hypocrisy.
that's what I wondered, if it
Yeah.
was regarded as a sin.
Well, we're all sinners, don't you know?
Yes, I'm not saying regarded.
Okay.
Sexuality kind of left by then. Hadn't he kind of left the church by then? Yeah, before they would have known.
That's one of the reasons why.
Well, that's one reason why he left. So yeah, so they never really knew what he was in terms of his sexuality.
Oh,
They had no
right.
idea. Yeah.
Firstly, thank you for saying slavery instead of slavery. I mentioned to a couple of friends that I was coming here today, but I should have told in advance. Didn't happen. They didn't seem to know about James Baldwin, but they are avid readers. So what would you recommend I suggest to them they start reading?
Wow. Everybody give one title of a book. Everybody go sit down. And then we'll go on to the next question. So,
I recommend Giovanni's Room. It's a classic, but with the little note that you're gonna hate every single character. They're all terrible people. No, it's
it's a stage play now as well. I think it's on stage. I think there's a stage play.
Oh, I don't know if there's a stage play, but yeah, I recommend Giovanni's Room.
I would say probably The Fire Next Time, because it's has a lot to do with what's happening now, and then they can move on to Go Tell Them on the Mountain.
I'm looking it up now. There's a biography of James Baldwin's life that I can't remember the name of it, but the guy who wrote his biography, that's worth looking at. It absolutely.
Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
I just can't remember, and come to me later. I'll tell you who that is, kind of thing. But that has been kind of the book that you said, The Fire Next Time, naturally is the book for me. But
Two now.
okay.
Me, If Bill Street Could Talk,
Yeah.
is one of the books I've cried at. If Bill Street Could Talk, Beale. I cried.
It's a movie as well.
Yeah, and I don't cry with many books. Yeah. Okay. Yes, thank you.
I want to read another country.
Okay. Does that help? That bliss? Great.
So I'm just wondering if anyone has something to say about kind of there was a playfulness and a joyfulness as well in in his writing, and I'm thinking about like relationships with, for example, Maya Angelou and the like. That there's that kind of there's a sense of fun and joy as well as struggle, and I'm just wondering if anyone wants to expand on that a little bit.
In terms of his writing.
His writing, or even his just approach to being in struggle.
I'll just mention, and then I'll let you talk. The very first piece was a friend of mine, by Rashida. She's a friend, and I've forgotten her name. Rashida Ismaili Abu Bakar. When she was growing up, so she's from Benin. When she first went to New York, and she was invited by her teacher, because a lot of people, the mentors, all along the way of some of these writers, they all kind of interlink. So she met Baldwin at a party for Paula Marshall's party. Can you imagine, going to the house of a lot of these African American authors? They would have these salons at home. And that's how she met James Baldwin. She was a student, and James Baldwin was there, and he came in, and Maya Angelou came in, and they were very playful with each other. She talks about that, and she was just there watching about their playfulness. So read that, it's a really lovely piece, and it's just some of her memories. But some of you might kind of know some other things you might want to say about the playfulness in his writing and whatever.
Well, just like Kadija just said, Harlem, where he grew up and lived, and Brooklyn, they would have these things called rent parties. I don't know if they have them here. Blues parties. Oh, I went to the blues party. There would be, sometimes the only antidote to all of this kind of horribleness is laughter, and just a comparison of notes, how people treated you. And I know myself and my friends on, my Black Stars in America would get together for an event to raise funding for something, and they're coming together. I remember that in that piece that you're talking about, Leah Simone was there, and and just the beauty of that is that you find that not only these people have great minds, they're people just like us. They get drunk, they get high, they talk loud, they say all kinds of things, crazy stuff that they might regret in the morning. But it was that playfulness, and it was that joy and that humor that got them through the horribleness.
I'm actually reading a James Baldwin novel right now. I've been taking my time with it. It's called Just Above My Head, and I find it really playful and engaging. Because when Baldwin writes about relationships, there's so much flirtation with it, playfulness behind those characters and the way that they kind of tease one another. That I find that really juicy and spicy at the same time. So yeah, I recommend that book.
What's the title again?
Just Above My Head.
Just Above My Head.
It's a thick one though.
Yeah, I think you just got to watch his interviews. Especially when you see somebody ask the most incredulous or stupid questions, and he had a way of just making the person look fool, and the individual didn't even realize that he was looking like a fool. I mean, that is the skill above all skills, is the way he could answer on the spot, the way he could turn a conversation. Watch his interviews. Just do the YouTubes of his interviews and watch the playfulness as well as the hard-hitting side of this man.
You've just reminded me, actually, Roy. I remember when I went to, I think this happens to a lot of black writers when people think, well, that's the only one. It's like, you've got Ben O'Keefe, so you don't need any other black male writer. So when Walter Mosley came here, I remember one time, and he went to, he was at some bookshop, and somebody stood up and said, how do you feel about being the most well-known black male writer in America? And Walter Mosley just kind of thought about it, and he just gave a history. He just gave a history of writing, of black male writers. He didn't say anything like, that's a stupid Freudian question. And he just gave the history, and of course included Baldwin in that. Just because he kind of realized, and maybe haven't realized before, just how much people didn't know about black writers, but as well. I mean, I've done stuff for libraries. I did stuff for libraries years ago, and I split things up between African American writers, Caribbean writers, Black British, and African American. So that, okay, Black British writers, and the first one they'd mentioned was Toni Morrison. Okay, and this is in a library. So you see the issues that we've kind of grown up with, that we're struggling with in terms of people knowing about the beauty of the writing.
I think we've got time for one more quick question. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I first read James Baldwin, I read Giovanni's Room, and I was struck by it, and it's strange about all his writing. It's so diverse. Little other characters gain prominence almost, as quickly as the big characters. But I was struck then and read Fire Next Time, and for me, he was his own man. Nobody. Well, I remember him. He went to the home of a black Muslim leader, and it was about, and he was being. It was like there was a lot of talk almost about division and almost hatred. And he said he had white friends, and he stood up. He was his own man. He made his own statements, and then he in Dark Days, which I've just been reading the first couple of stories, he went to this, I think it was a school, and there were lots of mixed race people, black and white people there, young, very young, and he said he had to stand back and let them speak, and he said, and the question of race came up, and this is where the philosophy part came in. He said, at first there was anger, and then they started talking to each other, asking each other questions, and they never knew each other. They never knew anything about each other. They had just these ideas in their heads. And so for me, and then things mellowed. They found they had more in common than they otherwise would have thought. Now, so this idea of this philosophy of unity, of not division but inclusion. I thought that was a theme of his book. I mean, his books. What do you think? Is that spoken about often enough when people promote his books?
I think Ray has got mentions of the whole meeting with Farrakhan as well in his book as well. But maybe if you guys could just have one last word, maybe respond to this question. One last word that we haven't talked about.
Well, inclusion was part of his life, because if he wasn't inclusive, then that makes him an hypocrite. Which is why when he had the meeting with Farrakhan, and Farrakhan wanted him to join the Islam Nation of Islam, and he had to say, "Well, I don't hate white people. I just hate what they do." And he understood that from that meeting, that what Farrakhan could do was use him, just like white people use him, or anybody else could use him in his celebrity and his platform. So he said, "I did not leave one church to go into another church. I left the church to become a writer," like he said. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying to all of us. I think most of the people in this room are artists. And I tend to think that in this time of the world, we need to weaponize our art and write directly and consciously to the injustices that are happening. And it could be through any medium. It could be funny, it could be humor. Humor is a great weapon. And I tend to think we've got to, like I said, we've got to stop thinking of ourselves as court jesters and think of ourselves as artistic warriors.
I think one of the key things that when he often talked about Black America and the struggle and the fight, he was almost saying, "Listen, I'm writing this to save white America. I want you to find your humanity, because if we keep going down this road, you're losing your humanity. You can't see it in this idea of segregation and everything that you're doing. You can't see how you're losing your humanity. So if there's anybody that was fighting for the humanity of white people or white America, it was Baldwin, through that conversation about race and what was going on."
Thank you. You have the last one.
Oh wow, it shouldn't be ending on me. I'm very sorry, everyone. One thing I was thinking about was with Giovanni's Room, and how Baldwin was able to write from a white perspective, a white man's perspective, a white straight man's perspective. And I find that really interesting because, I mean, obviously he wasn't any of those things. He wasn't any of those identities, but he lived in a world where that was everywhere. That was the norm. And in some ways, I suppose, if where am I trying to go with this? I wonder if it might sometimes be a little bit easier to have conversations about race specifically when we come from it trying to put ourselves in the other person's perspective. And I think that's something that Baldwin does very successfully in this particular novel. He's able to look at things from another type of experience. And I'm not sure if there are many white authors that do the same thing or not. But I think it's a good challenge for all of us to try to do those sort of things.
Just one thing, I mean, it's easy for me. I think it's easy for a lot of black people because we know all about white people. We grew up with them, we watched your television, we watched your movies, we got your records. We are the new, we know all about you. So, yeah, I mean, so it's not that hard to write about them. I mean, I was the only black boy in the dorm. They taught me about the Beatles, they taught me about Barbra Streisand, I taught them about James Brown. So it's if we can just share, I agree.
You wanted to say something about Du Bois? Yeah, because I wanted to actually, so you said.
I'm just thinking about Du Bois when you were talking about Du Bois talks of is it double vision or double consciousness. So this has been written from late 1890 or 1900 that we are at the place where we can see the journey of both sides. We suffer and see and understand. And of course that's how we write. That double vision. That's double consciousness.
So we could go on longer, I know. But I just really like to thank everybody. Please ask questions to the others as we're mingling, as you're buying books. You'll get your question answered quicker if you buy a book. Have some drink, have some fruit, whatever. So thank you so much. And please thank all these wonderful speakers this afternoon. McFarlane, James Baldwin, Kadija, and so many Thank you. And thank you for writing our legacy and to Jubilee Library for hosting us. Thanks so much. We wouldn't have had such a wonderful afternoon without you guys. Thank you.